a fracture or know somebody that's had a fracture? Please raise your hands. Look at that. Now, I can tell you that most of you healed with no problem. Could you imagine, because it was a pain, what it would be like if it didn't heal well and it took longer, or it didn't heal at all? Probably can't imagine that, but if you know some of your friends that have, it can be devastating. That's why Team Bone Health put together Ferroximend, which was something that we developed to accelerate fracture healing. What's the problem? The problem is that fractures create significant pain, as you can imagine, but also lost revenue, about $10 billion worth of downtime over the course of their injury. Do you know this gentleman, Roger Ebert, movie critic, very, very famous. Now, he had a problem. He had head and neck cancer, ultimately got radiated, and after that had a real problem with his radiation and a fracture, and that's what happened to him. But instead of hiding, instead of sort of going along with whatever happened to him, he wanted other people to know what it's like to be devastated in this way, so he was on the cover of Esquire magazine to bring this to bear. 20% of radiated fractures heal. That's it. That means 80% do not. Could you imagine having that fracture and it not healing? And the problem is that surgeons have no good solutions in brittle or irradiated bones. But we do. We put together this solution. It's called Ferroximend, a novel single-application bone filler device, and the device consists of hyaluronic acid and DFO putty, and it's formulated and put in this simple syringe. Now, what are the constituents? Hyaluronic acid, already FDA approved, but as a filler device. It's got structural support, an extracellular matrix, and it's got great viscoelastic properties that can fill that fracture site. DFO, or deferoxamine, is also FDA approved, but for iron overload, for something completely different. So it's already been in use in humans in much greater doses for things like hemochromatosis, where it actually binds that iron. It functions as an iron chelator, but our dose is much smaller, and it's put together as that group, and we can actually inject it if we want to. So we found the novel utility, really, of deferoxamine and seeing how that works. That local iron chelator, what happens is when you put it in the fracture site, it binds iron. Well, that iron is really, really important to an enzyme that breaks down what they call HIF-1 alpha. Since it doesn't break it down because the iron isn't there, it's constitutive. It means it sticks around. So we make blood vessels, and we make them well. And that is what happens. If you look at a fracture site which didn't heal, there's a lack of vascularity in that fracture site, what you can see on the upper area, and you get a non-union. But Ferroximend, which leads to increased vascularity, it's a burst of vascularity. Bone cells can attach, it enhances mineral deposition, and it facilitates the generation of biomechanically really good unions in bones. So who are the customers for this? How many of those people are out there? Greater than 2 million people in the United States and 10 million globally each year. If you add dental applications, because people get radiated in that head and neck area, you're talking about 1 million more customers that would use this. And who are the customers from the surgical standpoint? Orthopedic surgeons, plastic surgeons, and dentists. Why? Because it's easy to use, a single application, and although you can use it in the operating room, you don't have to. Under fluoro, you could inject it. Could you imagine if you're an older patient that has a fracture that won't heal? You can die from such a fracture. This is the kind of thing that can make a difference in that regard. Insurance companies? Sure. Pay less. So who are the stakeholders? Pretty much everybody. The patients want it, surgeons, hospitals, employers, and insurance companies, because it saves time, reduces cost, and it has very high performance. We already have patent applications, both internationally and through the US, both composition of matter and method of use. So how are we going to put this together, and who's the sort of the competitive landscape out there? Well, it turns out that there's not just one company that dominates the market for implants out there. That's great. Why? Because any one of these companies can be a potential acquirer. These would be the strategics that would take this to the next level as we move forward. So is there anything else like it out there with our competition? Really not. The only thing that was close were 2 biologics that went out there. By the way, those biologics, when they went to the FDA, they were approved as devices, which means it didn't take as much time to be able to get them to market. One was called Infuse and the other one was called OP1. The problem was they were biologics. For people that are in manufacturing, biologics are very, very difficult to manufacture. We're not like that. We have our devices fairly easy to be able to use. They used it in a spine application, which was a mistake, and now it's on a black box warning because of overgrowth. Ours has been used for many years in different ways, and we have found over the last 10 years that we do not have a problem with overgrowth at all, and there really is no significant side effect profile. As I told you, they use it in much greater doses in different ways, but not in this formulation the way that we've done it. So let's look at the market size from a business proposition. The fragility market, which are oral fragile fractures, are greater than 10 million patients a year globally, 2.1 a year in the US market. What does that translate to? Big bucks. $50 billion a year globally and $11 billion a year if it's in the United States of America. So let's look at what we're talking about when we're talking about the fragility fracture market. That could be, for instance, avascular necrosis, osteoporosis is fairly large, diabetes, spinal compression fractures. But look at the one in the red at the bottom, radiated fractures. Remember Roger Ebert? That's what we're talking about. Now, why did we make that decision? We made that decision because it was hard. That's why we did. If you can heal a bone in nuclear winter, you can heal a bone anywhere. So that's what we did. I want to show you what we've done with 10 years of NIH preclinical funding. If you look on this right side over here, then you'll see what a normal fracture healing would be. That's what normally happens with all of us. About 100% of our fractures heal. It's pretty rare for it not to happen. But when they're radiated, look at the bottom. You can see what happened to Roger Ebert's mandible right there. Fell apart. But look above. That's the vascularity that it has. That's exactly what I was talking about. But with Ferroximend, look what happens. It bursts with blood vessels. And what does that mean? We go from 20% to 91%. We're talking about a major change, 5 times in the ability to actually get a union and move it forward. But would this really work in humans? Well, why? Yes, it does. When I go on these, I'm a craniofacial surgeon, and I go out and I talk about this, especially some of my preclinical work. What do the surgeons out there want to know at the meeting? Where can I get this stuff? So I had one guy that called me, one doctor out from Stanford, and he said, I have this patient. If you look at over there, his midface didn't grow because he had radiation like Roger Ebert. I want to be able to move his face out and do surgery, but I know it's going to fail. What can we do? I said, well, it's not on formulary right now. We can't do it, but we have one component on formulary. We can try that. Well, we did, off-label. We put 2 tubes back in the areas back of his maxilla. One of them fell out. That wasn't on purpose, but it did give us an internal control. And it turns out that if you look on the left side, there was really very, very little bone that formed, and on the other side, a burst of bone, and if you look down there, it worked. It was fortuitous. I had nothing to do with the tube falling out. It happened at Stanford, so there you go. Go blue. It wouldn't have happened here. But I'm sort of glad that it did. So what's our plan? Our plan is to de-risk. That's what we're going to do until we get that stakeholder. So what we're going to do at first is continue to complete preclinical GLP studies. GLP just means good lab practice. Hire regulatory consultants. We've already talked to them. One of the keys that we need to do is to get a designation by the FDA as a device. It's not that far out there to be able to get that done because, as I told you, those biologics were devices in the past. So our plan right now is to get that FDA designation and then a clinical trial. Will that be expensive? 91% versus 20. You'll probably only need 100 patients to be able to show it. So then what we do is we just continue to de-risk. We can move from there to avascular necrosis, to diabetes mellitus if we want, but at some point, we will exit. Why? Because a stakeholder will be in there. A key stakeholder will be the ones that we want to be able to take it to the next level. So our revenue cost proposition is quite profitable. Our target fracture, which is just that radiation fracture, about 100,000 patients annually. Price per syringe, we know what the BMP got, $6,500. What does it cost us? $100. Pretty nice profit margin. If you do that math, that's $650 million. But that's for the small group. If we actually talk about the entire fragility market at 2.1 million patients, now we're talking about big bucks, $13.65 billion with a B dollars moving forward. So what's our risk category? We're defining a regulatory pathway. We have the people online to be able to do that with very, very good promises about what might happen, but of course, that's a risk as we move forward. We want to be either a device versus a drug-device combination by the device side of the FDA, and we're going to work with them to mitigate the problems that we have to move forward. So what's our business strategy? Seek regulatory consultations from our experts, sort of already there. Continue preclinical validation studies. We have a punch list that we're doing right now. Complete GLP studies and prepare for that designation to the FDA. But the main thing is, and what I want to do is bring our product to market so we can form a corporation, but we can exit at any point when the right stakeholder comes around. What are our milestones? Regulatory consultations, and we're working with them right now. Complete the preclinical validation GLP studies and prepare for that request for designation as we move forward. I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to bring Ferroximend to you and to your attention, and with the possibility that one day when I'm in the operating room here at the University of Michigan, I can say, give me that Ferroximend, I think I can use it today. Thank you so much.